So welcome back to the Windows 8.1 UX Design Jumpstart. And my name is Martin Thierien. I'm a user experience evangelist with Microsoft. And Chris is with me.
Hi, Chris Mayo. I'm also a user experience evangelist here at Microsoft.
So in this session we'll talk more about, well, actually less is more. We've seen in the previous presentation that there were principles that we built Windows 8 on, and we also have these guidelines for Windows apps. In this presentation we'll talk more about what that means for your app and how you can help users to focus in your app. Now, when your app will have a focus on something, and the better the focus is, and you also think about the scenarios and the features used in your app, then the easier it is for the user to use your app and to understand what's happening there. Yesterday evening I thought of it's almost like writing a book. So you have a title for a book, right? And when the title is like The Bank Robbery or something, it's not about elves or about this princess, or it's about the bank robbery, right? And there are a few persons here. There's a guy who does the bank robbery, he wants to get rich, and the other one who wants to get the guy because he's all about justice and things like that. And again, there's no princess there are no dragons, it's just about this thing. And that's the same with thinking about the goal of your app. It should be clear for the user what the goal of this app is and what happens in the app, what he can do with the app. And those are the scenarios and features. And we'll go more into detail in a few slides. Now, when you start thinking of an app, you want to think of what your app is great at. And that's really the place to start, because this will give you focus for the rest of the design and development of your application. And the steps we'll go through in this session is first decide on what your app is great at, and then we'll look at the scenarios to support that goal of your app, and look at the features that support the scenarios for that app, and how you can brainstorm around that and make your decisions what to do and what not to do in the app. Now, of course, this is a good start for the first application. It doesn't limit you for the complete lifetime of the application, because later on you might want to add features or scenarios. But this is especially for the first versions that you have really good focus for your application and what to do there. When you think this is complicated, when you're not used to think about creating apps like this, it's not actually that complicated. Like it says here, take inspiration from every day. Maybe you're a designer, maybe you're a developer, but we're all users. We all use apps. Right. So look around the apps you're using, what you think is useful or is handy in apps. And also think of the flows you use in apps to get to a specific goal. It's just experience that you also want to put in your app to make it easy for the user to use it.
That's one of the funny things, honestly, when you see these, like you read stories about people that design something that like you love and that you use every day, whether it's an app or a device or something like that. Yeah. I mean, one of the first stories that they tell, like, where did you get the idea for this? It was like, well, it was me or my family or my friends, couldn't do this, or it wasn't as easy as it should have been to do that. And that's where they come up with the design. So it can come just from everyday life, right? And become the next big thing.
Exactly. So that's just thinking about what that special goal for your app is. And here's an example. For instance, I'm always looking for delicious new recipes and sharing my cooking experience with my friends. So this is just an idea. And you see already a common theme here. Again, there are no princesses and dragons and etc. here. This is just about recipes and my passion for cooking and sharing it with my friends. So this could be a very good idea that I have for an app. So how do I take those steps into the great ad statement and the scenarios and features? Now, this is the first step. Create a great ad statement for your application. And this is also known when you think of a business or a project or a company, you think of a mission statement. Just one simple sentence that guides you where you're heading, right? And that's the same with the great ad statement. A great ad statement should be specific, only one sentence, and it should be truly differentiated. So, for instance, when you're thinking of a news app, you're not thinking of, well, I just built a news app, or this is a news app. There are tons of other news apps, so why is your news app better than the other ones? So this is what you think about. Maybe it's the way you handle the news, or you show it, or maybe what kind of news. So think about that when you think about great ad statements, and just have a simple mission statement or great ad statement for your app. So you have focus for your app and the decisions you make, what you will implement in this application.
And that's a good point, because I mean, I know you design a lot of apps as well, and when you're working with teams, I mean, you know, so often you'll start and people will start talking about the app from the perspective of features, yes. Right? It's going to have this feature or that feature and so on. And eventually you get to the point where the app just becomes just like a glob of features rather than being something that someone's going to be really excited about and want to use every single day. So, I mean, I know when we're working with teams, design teams, helping them design their first Windows Store app, you know, we'll stop the presses and stop everything until we get that great ad statement, and even go as far as to, you know, post it somewhere in the design room or where the design and development team can see it, just so they're always focused on every single thing they do to realize that crafted, unique, truly differentiated thing that's going to make that app great, the greatest in the store in that category.
Yeah.
Right?
And it's the direction we're all going in when we're building the app and making decisions for that.
Yeah.
So what does a great ad statement look like? Well, it's not really defined, but this is something that can help you. This app is great at, and then describe what it is great at. So it gives you a head start on thinking about the great ad statement. When you think about great ad statements, you want to make that up when you start, as we said before. So from the start, we want to make sure what our goal is and what the focus is. And then we want to focus on scenarios and features that really support that great ad statement. So what can we do in the app, and in what ways to support that greatness of the app. And then we want to remove everything else. So remove all the distractions and just focus on that. We don't want to build apps with like a zillion of features in it and a zillion of scenarios, because then the user will get lost all the time. And we used it for both the design and the development process. So we think of what we put on the screen, what's on the canvas, where it is, or how many screens we use, or how big the screen is, or things like that. But we also think of this with the development. What kind of features, or how complicated should it be, or how easy we can make it for the user. But all tied to that great ad statement. So this is a great help for you to focus with your application. This is an example of a great ad statement for a cookbook app. So we saw before the idea of thinking about recipes and sharing that with my friends, etc. So in this case, it says Contoso Cookbook is great at helping friends discover, prepare, and share recipes. Now this gives a lot of focus, because you see a number of verbs here. There's discover, prepare, share, and it's all about recipes. And there's also friends in there. So you see there's a social aspect. We know it's about recipes and also what we can do with it. So this is already a lot of focus for this app, for building this app.
And there's some great uniqueness there too. I mean, there's lots of social apps and there's lots of cooking apps. But I mean, this, even though it's, you know, fictitious just for the kind of the discussion today, but even looking at it and saying, hey, this is about that social experience around sharing recipes that we, you know, do with our friends all the time. Oh, that was great. At, you know, have somebody at a dinner party. That was great. You know, do I have the recipe for that? And just sharing cooking experiences and stuff like that. That is a great example of something that would be super focused and differentiated, which is a great goal.
Yeah, and it also depends on what kind of app you're building. Yeah. Because the fewer apps in that category are there, the simpler your great ad statement is. Because when you're the first there, well, it's a very easy one to describe. Yeah. But always think of that to give it focus. Right. Okay, now we know about the great ad statement. The next step is choosing the right scenarios for that great ad statement to support that great ad statement. And we want to only pick those scenarios that support it. So we don't want to think about scenarios that are really a bit off track.
Right.
When we think of the example of the book about the bank robber again, when the bank robber goes to the supermarket to buy his groceries and stuff like that, it's like, so what's this information? It doesn't help me to get into the story. And that's the same with the scenarios in your app. Try to get away with the scenarios that don't really support that great ad statement. Now, what is a scenario? And again, I come back to the bank robber book.
Right.
There's the scenario of the characters, the one that wants to get the money as fast as possible with as less effort as possible, and the other one who wants to just have justice being done and make sure that the world is a safe place. So you have those scenarios. And that's the same in the apps. You think of the activities that the user wants to accomplish in that app,
right.
the goals he has in that app. And you think about those things that support your great ad statement. And scenarios more of like a sequence of events. There are most of the time multiple steps you have to take to get to the
right.
result, or maybe choose from different events to get to the result. But that completes a complete scenario. Now, how do you come up with those scenarios for your app? A very good thing to do is to have a brainstorming. Now, the purpose of a brainstorming is to really, well, have a storm in your brain, right?
Sure.
To really think about things like, what are just ideas that pop up?
Yeah.
And when you do brainstorming, you don't limit yourself to, oh no, this can be done, or
right.
this is a stupid idea, or you just write down everything you come up with.
Right.
And it's good to do that with your team.
Yes.
So you have various ideas and to think about what are all the things that could be scenarios in this app. Now in this case we did a scenario brainstorming for this cookbook application and sharing recipes. And you see these are all the results that came from that brainstorming. So things like find recipes I want to make, or read recipe reviews, or find a cooking class. These are all things that came from that brainstorm. Now we already talked about scenarios and
right.
features. So to see what's different between those two. So a scenario is the goal you want to
right.
reach in your app. It's the what of your app. What do you want to do in your app? Features are the supporting steps for those scenarios. So how will I get to that goal that I have with that scenario? So it's a means to an end. And it helps you to get to the goal you have with the scenario. So when we look again at that scenario list, this came from the brainstorming, but there are features in
right.
here which are not really like complete stories. They're just small things that you can do. So when we remove that from the list, you see things like read a recipe review. That could be very valuable, but it's just supporting of a scenario,
right.
and it's not a scenario in itself. Or browse recipes by cuisine, or make notes on the recipe. You can see that those are all features. So what we want to do is remove scenarios that don't support the great ad statement.
Right.
Now we've removed all the features and just have a clear list of scenarios that support my great ad statement. Now on this slide you see that there's the great ad statement we have for this app. So the Comtosa cookbook is great at helping friends discover, prepare and share recipes. So we cross out all the remaining scenarios that doesn't support this great ad statement. And that brings us to actually these three scenarios. Find a recipe I want to make, prepare a recipe and share recipes with my friends. Now you might think this is very limited for an app, but that's the goal of this exercise, is to have a very clear goal within an app. And most of the time, there may be between 3 and 5 scenarios you
right.
implement in an app. And again, you don't implement like hundreds of scenarios in your app because it's too overwhelming for a user.
And that's something that, you know, it's very focused when you look at that great ad statement
Yeah.
scenarios. You can look at that great ad statement, you know, and kind of check and balance against those scenarios. And if I can accomplish, I believe in the great ad statement, it's what's going to make my app differentiated and unique and popular in the store. And I can look at those scenarios, and if I could accomplish those scenarios, right, and and realize the great at statement, I know that I've got that good check and balance, right?
Yeah.
You know, everything else is removed. I'm super focused on that greatness.
Exactly. Yeah. So now we have selected the core scenarios we want for this fictitious app. Let's go to the next step of choosing the right features. And again, features are the supporting ones for the scenario, so how to get to the goal. So these are the specific steps. And it's good to think that the scenarios are the reasons that why people will use your app.
Right.
They don't think, oh, there's this beautiful button in the app, so I will just install it, right? It's about the complete scenario. Maybe they think of, I can modify my picture in this app and have all these cool things I can do, or design things I can do with the photos. And that's built of all the features. So again, features is the how we will get to the scenario, to the goal of the scenario. When you think of choosing the right features, well, we can have a brainstorming of all the features we can have in our app. And again, we will use the great at statement and the list of scenarios you already have to make the selection from that. And features are used by most users, so don't think of things that might be useful in some cases somewhere for some user, or maybe for the power user, but think of the features, especially when you start, that will be useful for most of the users. Right. So in this case, again, we did the brainstorming of the features. Now this is a bigger list than we saw with the scenarios, because now the team understood what features are. So they came up with all kinds of ways to filter or to sort or to, for instance, find wine suggestions, print a recipe, share information, all kind of sharing is here. So you see the list is again bigger and bigger. So what do we do with this list? Of course, we sanitize it again to make sure that we have a good list of features for this app. So first we ask ourselves, does this feature support the scenario? Now in this case, for instance, view pantry suggestions for cuisine or provide a kitchen timer. Those might be great features, but they don't support our great at statement and the core scenarios we have defined in the previous steps. So those are features we remove from the list. We won't implement that, at least in this first version. The next step we do is we look at features that are actually supported by the charms. When you look at the charms in Windows, we see the share and the search and the settings and the devices. So we have some standard things there that users get to know when they use Windows. So we can remove things like that from the list, like a login, a logout, search by title, things like that, and remove that from the list of features.
And they're all important. It's just that when you go to design for those particular contracts and stuff like that, you'll be taking care of it there, right? So.
And this is just for the moment. So maybe in a later stage, some features come back because we want to emphasize them within the app in a different way. So this is the next step we want to do. We want to eliminate a content layout feature. So that means there are features, they are within the app. Right. So for instance, showing a few recipe photos. When you show recipe, it's obvious to show the photo there as well. So it's not a separate step in the process. So we also want to eliminate system features, things that are part of the system, like a cut, copy, paste, for instance. Those are very useful actions, but they're in the system, so we don't need to do anything special for it. Right. So then we end up with the final feature list. So from the long list of features, this is the list of features that remained in that list. But now we want to tie them to the core scenarios we have. So the next step is that here you see the 3 core scenarios, and with each we have assigned the features to support those scenarios, to get to the result of those scenarios. And another step we do is that we want to better group these set of features, so to group them together. So for instance, here you see browse recipes. So you see there's a browse recipes by cuisine, filter and sort functions for that, etc. So here it gives you an idea how to group things together, and we used to do that to have your menus and your grouped menus and
Right.
things like that. But this is also useful for to know how to combine commands, for instance, in your app and etc.
This is a really good kind of a check and balance again. If you look at that list of the scenarios and features, if you've got a feature that you can't really figure out what scenario that supports, then chances are that's something you need to eliminate. It's going to be something that's going to muddy or water down what your app is great at. But just like if you go look at that list and there's that scenario and you really can't look at the feature list and see how you're going to accomplish that scenario, again, that should be a little bit of a red flag that you and your team should go back and figure out, what is that scenario and how it's going to be accomplished. But even in this simple, fictitious example that we've been walking through, if you look at that great at statement, the scenarios and the features, you really kind of see that beautiful relationship between my app's going to be great at this. These are the things that users are going to they're going to accomplish with the scenarios to realize that greatness, and these features are how they're going to do it. And it just, for everybody on the team, it just adds an element of clarity to the entire process that really, makes the rest of your job, whether you're on the design side or you're on the developer side or even, the product marketing or whatever. It's really, really easy to see this is what we're building, right?
And that's why it's good to do this with the team, because everyone is involved. So the developers know what it means to implement this. The designers know what they need to do in the interaction models and etc. And maybe the business marketing people know what is useful for the user. So this is very good exercise to do. So to recap what we've seen in this session, we've talked about that focus is needed for your apps. Think of the great at statement. What is your app great at? Which core scenarios do you need to support this great at statement? And which features do you need to implement those core scenarios in your app? And that is a very important starting step to start building a great app. Now, normally when we do that, we also have a lab. And this is something you can do for yourself when you're thinking about an app. Go through this exercise to think about that great at statement, the scenarios that support that, and the features to support those scenarios. And think of all the things we talked about, how you select those scenarios and features, etc. So you have a very good goal where to go at with your application and building your application. When you go to the Design Center, there's a special section there on envisioning. So it talks about this great at statement, how to do that, brainstorming, etc. So you can get more information there. So go visit the Design Center. Again, go to design.windows.com and you find all the different sections there. So that concludes this session. It was so clear there are no questions.
Absolutely.
So we'll have a 10-minute break. And we'll back to you in 10 minutes. Thanks.